First of all, let's have a discussion on professional judgment, which is very easy to understand. Being an auditor, you are made responsible to take several decisions during the course of or during the process of conducting audit. I repeat, being an auditor, you are made responsible to take several types of decisions or judgments during the course of performance of audit or in the process of audit. Unfortunate thing is that nobody will help you in taking such decisions. It is up to you to take such decisions. When nobody is helping you in taking decisions, you must be extra careful. If you are not careful, the decisions taken by you will become wrong, and ultimately the auditor may be subjected to a risk called as audit risk. If I say audit risk, you should be able to recollect what is audit risk. Please try to explain me what is an audit risk. I know very well that that point has already been explained to you in a detailed way. Please try to remember the subject in your mother tongue. Okay? Don't try to remember the subject in the language that you are learning. Try to remember the subject in your mother tongue, and when you want to express it, convert it into English. That is most important. Otherwise, it will take some more time for you to understand the subject, to retain the subject also. So remembering the subject in your mother tongue is more important for you. It will certainly help you a lot. Please follow my guideline if you are having any issues in understanding the subject. Right. So I repeat the point again. During the course of performance of audit, as an auditor, you are supposed to take different types of judgments or decisions, and it is the auditor is made responsible to take such decisions. While taking such decisions by you, nobody will help you. You are alone made responsible for taking such decisions. If you by mistake, if you take some wrong decisions, then there will be an increased risk called as audit risk. I am asking you about what is an audit risk. Audit risk can be defined as the risk arising to the auditor in a situation where the auditor expresses an inappropriate audit opinion. So, if you want to reduce in a situation where the auditor expresses an inappropriate audit opinion, when the financial statements are materially misstated, that is all about audit risk. So, if you were the auditor, would you try to increase your audit risk or would you try to reduce your audit risk? In order to reduce your audit risk, what should you do? You need to express an appropriate opinion. In order to express an appropriate opinion, you need to take correct judgments. In order to take correct judgments, you should be very much careful. Why? Because you are the only person made responsible for taking different types of professional decisions or judgments during the course of performance of audit. Nobody is going to help you in that matter. Therefore, you must be careful while taking decisions. That is what he is going to explain to you under the heading professional judgment. What is meant by professional judgment? Professional judgment means taking decisions by the auditor. When should the auditor take decisions? During his audit that are appropriate. What happens if the auditor fails to take appropriate decisions? The opinion given by auditor will become inappropriate. When the opinion given by the auditor becomes inappropriate, there will be an increased risk in audit risk. Are you able to correlate what is discussed with what is appearing here? Please read it again. What is a professional judgment taken by a professional is called as professional judgment. Oh, eye-opening fact. What is professional judgment? Judgment taken by a professional. Being an auditor, you are a professional. Any decision taken by you is technically called as professional judgment. It means taking some decisions by the auditor during the course of his audit that are appropriate. That means always the auditor is expected to take appropriate decisions, appropriate judgments, which will lead to providing appropriate opinion, which will lead to reduction of audit risk. So if you want to reduce audit risk, you need to take appropriate decisions. If you want to take appropriate decisions, you should be very careful You should be very careful while taking such decisions. When the auditor is more careful, decisions taken by the auditor will be said to be more appropriate. When the decisions taken by the auditor are more appropriate, opinion given by the auditor is said to be more appropriate. When the opinion given by the auditor is more appropriate, obviously auditor gets reduced. Read it again. Professional judgment means taking some decisions by the auditor during the course of performance of his audit, which should be appropriate in the circumstances. The decisions so taken by the auditor must be appropriate in the circumstances. Such decisions are required to be taken by the auditor by using his knowledge, his training, and his experience. If you do not use knowledge, training, and experience, and if you are not careful while taking such decisions or judgments, then the decisions taken by you will become inappropriate and there will be an increased audit risk to the auditor. Now the question, most important point, is not about the meaning of professional judgment. It is about in what areas or which areas, as an auditor we are made responsible to take professional judgments. Fortunately, most of the areas have already been explained to you. You are having very good knowledge of those aspects. If something has not been explained till date, I will try to explain it under that heading. Read it. Auditor is required to take professional judgments throughout the course of throughout the course of audit. I don't want to explain you what is planning, what is performing, and what is concluding, because we are in the initial chapter number 1. I'm having an experience of these points while I'm pursuing CA course. There was a subject in CA course while I'm pursuing a CA course is called as O&M, Organization and Management. I received CA Institute's material after registration. That O&M is for 50 marks and there are 5 chapters in O&M. I started preparing on my own for that subject, Organization and Management. Initially, I thought of completing chapter number 1. I still remember the name of the chapter. The name of the chapter is Organization and Management. I started preparing for the chapter for almost 10 to 15 days. Unfortunately, even after spending several hours of time, I am unable to understand even a single word in that chapter. And I thought of even discontinuing the CA course. Why? Because I am unable to understand a particular word or a subject even after spending a lot of time. But fortunately, one day I have gone through, I don't know why I have gone through that, but fortunately I have gone through the 5th material. The 5th material deals with the concept of communication, which is very easy to understand, very much interesting also. I completed that chapter within a span of just 5 to 6 days because which is very interesting, easy to understand. So later I opened chapter number 4, which deals with the concept of motivation. Later chapter number 3. Later chapter number 2. And finally I am able to understand chapter number 1 after completion of all the remaining chapters. After completion of chapter number 5, 4, 3, 2, I am able to understand the words that are used in chapter number 1. Now I am telling you chapter number 1 without completing 2, 3, 4, 5. That is the reason why the discussion is taking this much time, because every word is required to be introduced. If it is introduced briefly, I need to say that I am explaining this point briefly now and I will explain that elaboratively at a later point of time. If I use this term for 100 to 200 times in a day, you won't trust me. Okay, that is the reason why, although time is running out, I am taking that point into account to explain each and every word in an elaborative manner so that you can have a good understanding of chapter number 1. I feel that this chapter is required to be explained to the student only after completion of the entire syllabus. But this is being explained to you initially. That is the problem with understanding this chapter. Okay, done. Now, professional judgment. Why I skipped the terms planning, performing and concluding? Because if I complete SA 300, you can understand planning. The name of SA 300 is Audit, Planning, Strategy and Audit Program. So without understanding SA 300, without completion of SA 300, in fact that is the last chapter that I will deal with. You cannot understand the term planning. Performing is somewhat known to you, but conclusion means audit reporting. What is that? There are several standards on auditing which deal with audit reporting, which were cited to you earlier, like SA 700, 701, 705, 706, 710, etc. If we are able to complete all these standards, then only you can understand the term conclusion of audit. So planning of audit, performing the audit and conclusion of audit is nothing but the entire auditing subject that you can understand only after completion of these standards. That is the reason why I'm trying to ignore the terms planning, performing and concluding the audit. I am focusing on those terms which are easily understandable to you as of now. So professional judgment is to be used by the auditor throughout audit, whether it be in dash stage or in dash stage, whether it be in planning stage of audit or in performing the audit or at the conclusion stage of audit. In every stage of audit, auditor is required to take several types of judgments which are technically called as professional judgments. If such judgments made by the auditor becomes inappropriate, there will be an increased risk to the auditor. Therefore, you must be very careful while taking such judgments or decisions. So professional judgment is to be used, or professional judgments are to be made by the auditor throughout the period of audit, including planning stage, performing stage and conclusion stage. The following are said to be the areas. Wherein usually auditor is expected to take some professional judgments. Simply speaking, in the following areas, as an auditor, you need to take dash professional judgment. Have I explained you anything earlier about the concept of materiality? I know very well that I explained it. But before introducing you the concept of materiality, I asked you a question like this. You were appointed as the auditor of an entity. You have performed the entire audit. After completion of the entire audit, you are able to find a mistake or misstatement of just 1 rupee. Now you are made responsible to take a judgment, to take a decision about whether such financials, to take a judgment or decision about whether financial statements are free from material misstatements and hence whether they are reflecting a true and fair view. Tell me, if you find a mistake or misstatement of 1 rupee, can you treat it as material? No. If you find a mistake of 1 crore rupees, should you treat it as material? Obviously, yes. In layman's language, material means important. As an auditor, we don't consider misstatements. We consider only dash misstatements. As an auditor, we don't consider every misstatement. We consider only material misstatements. Then I explained you about the concept of materiality. As an auditor, you must try to identify not misstatements. You need to identify material misstatements. I have given you another definition of materiality, which is given under SA 320. That other definition of materiality, which is given under SA 320, reads as follows. Material items can be defined as material items can be defined material items can be defined as those items that will influence the decisions of users of financial statements. If any item in the financial statements is having the capability of influencing the decisions made by the users of the financial statements. By making use of financial statements, such items are required to be considered by you as an auditor as material items. And you will learn a lot of things about the concept of materiality in future when we are having a discussion on SA 320, materiality in planning and performing the audit. That is the heading of SA 320, materiality in planning and performing the audit. Again, the term planning is appearing there. Okay. So for which I have given you an example also. You have purchased some shares in a company by investing an amount of 1 lakh rupees. After purchase of shares in the company, you came, why you purchased some shares in that company? Because you have gone through dash of the company, financial statements of the company, and you find that the company got a profit of 40 lakh rupees. The company got a profit of 40 lakh rupees within a period of 1 month, that too by introducing a capital of 1 lakh. Feeling it as a lucrative offer, you have purchased some shares in that company. Subsequent to purchase of your shares in the company, you came to know that the accountant of the company made a mistake worth rupees 8. An expenditure of 8, which is actually revenue in nature, has been treated by the accountant as capital expenditure. So instead of debiting that 8 rupees to the profit and loss account, accountant had reflected it in the balance sheet. Now you have identified a mistake in the financial statements. Will you feel regret or sorry for the decision that you make when you come across this misstatement? That was the question that I raised on that day. I am raising the question again. How much is the profit earned by the company? 40 lakhs. How much is the mistake that you have found in the financial statements? It is just 8 rupees. Had the accountant treated this misstatement correctly, this expenditure correctly, the company would have earned a profit of 39,99,992. There will be a reduction of profit to the tune of just 8 rupees. Would we consider it as material? No. If that amount of mistake is 80 rupees, would you consider it as material? No. If it is 800, no. If it is 8,000, no. If it is 80,000, I don't want to explain. All these things are already explained. 80,000, no. If the misstatement found by you in the circumstances is 8 lakhs, still we can say that the misstatement is not material. Why? Because even after adjusting this amount of 8 lakh rupees, still the company is having a profit of how much? 32 lakhs. With a capital of just 1 lakh, that too by carrying out business for 1 month, if the company is able to get a profit of 32 lakhs, is it not sufficient for you? Enough. So even a mistake of 8 lakhs cannot be considered as material by the auditor. Then finally I said like this: accountant of the company made a mistake of just 80 lakh rupees. That is revenue in nature, but it has been reflected as a capital expenditure by the accountant. Now tell me, do you feel regret or sorry for the decision that you already made? Yes. So 8 rupees, 80, 800, 8,000, 80,000, 8 lakhs are not influencing your decision. 80 lakhs is an item which is able or capable of influencing your decision. That item which is capable of influencing the decisions of the users of the financial statements is to be technically called as a material item. Now, I will try to introduce you a concept in the briefest possible manner. Once I start a concept, I will try to complete it off. But because of the time, I want to explain it in the briefest possible manner. Okay? Generally, what as auditors we do is, before commencement of audit, we generally fix a level. Before commencement of audit, we generally fix a level called as materiality level. What is that? Before commencement of the audit, usually auditors are expected to fix a level called as a materiality level. For example, I fixed a materiality level of 1 lakh rupees. This is very important for you people, because in future I will not only explain you materiality, but I need to explain you another concept called as a performance materiality, which is very difficult too. Have I explained the term performance materiality? No. Okay. I fixed a materiality of how much? 1 lakh rupees. What is the meaning of that 1 lakh rupees? If the total of misstatements, found by the auditor. If the total of mistakes or misstatements found by the auditor during the course of performance of audit, during the course of performance of audit are well within this materiality level. I repeat, auditor may identify some mistakes or misstatements while he is performing his audit. All the mistakes or misstatements, identified by the auditor shall have to be accumulated by the auditor. What is that? You started conducting audit. When you are performing audit, you keep on identifying some mistakes. Whenever you identify any mistake or misstatement, it is your responsibility as an auditor to write down the details of the mistake or misstatement found by you on a paper. That is nothing but technically called as dash. Accumulation of misstatements, not material. Accumulation of misstatements identified by the auditor. So you started conducting audit, you started identifying misstatements, and you started accumulating all such misstatements. Meanwhile, you completed your audit. And if the total of accumulated misstatements were well within the materiality level. Let us assume that the total of misstatements, there is a need to make some changes to this explanation in future. As of now, this is sufficient. In future, I will try to explain it in a different way. Okay? Right. So, the total of misstatements accumulated by the auditor are 80,000. Now tell me, if you were the auditor, would you consider this 80,000 misstatements as only misstatements or as material misstatements? Fortunately, some of you people are capable of understanding this. These are only misstatements. They cannot be considered, they are not being considered by you as an auditor as material. Why? Because the total of the misstatements that you find are well within dash, are well within the materiality level fixed by the auditor. The materiality level fixed by the auditor. For example, if you have accumulated misstatements to the tune of say 1,10,000 rupees, what is the level fixed by the auditor? 1 lakh. How much is the total amount of mistakes or misstatements identified by the auditor during the course of performance of audit? It is 1,10,000, which is in excess of. So, materiality level in the given case is the level up to which you can tolerate. Up to which you can tolerate. Assume that she started talking with the person adjacent to her I want to make changes to my example. She started talking to the girl sitting next to her while I am giving a lecture. Okay, I fixed a materiality level of 10. What is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of that? When she started talking with the girl sitting next to her for the first time, I ignore it. I bear it. I don't say anything to her. Second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, eighth time, ninth time, 10th time. If she starts speaking with the person next to her, then for the 11th time, I will certainly ask her why you are sitting in the class. Do one thing. Go out of the class and you can have discussions out of the class, not in the class. So I have a bearing capacity of up to 10 times, not more. Here also, audit is having a bearing capacity of how much? 1 lakh, not more than that. Are you able to? Don't try to focus on the example. Example has been given only for your understanding. Okay? Try to focus on the concept. So here, what the auditor is trying to do, he is trying to fix a level up to which he won't consider misstatements as dash material. If the total of misstatements identified by the auditor crosses or exceeds that materiality level of 1 lakh, the auditor will consider them as material. Auditor can tolerate up to a mistake. The auditor can tolerate. The auditor can tolerate. The auditor can tolerate. The auditor can tolerate. Why I am repeating all these times is because in future No. For everything there is a base for that. In future, I will try to explain you SA 530, which exclusively deals with audit sampling, wherein there are two terms used in SA 530. They are tolerable misstatement and tolerable rate of deviation, which is having a link with this materiality level. That is the reason why I am telling you that this is the maximum amount up to which I can tolerate. Up to which I can tolerate. So what do you understand by this discussion? Every auditor before commencement of audit has to fix a level called as materiality level. In what way fixing materiality level will help the auditor? If the auditor is able to fix materiality level, he can conclude whether financial statements are free from material misstatements or are financial statements should be free from material misstatements. They cannot be free from misstatements. Always financial statements do contain some misstatements, but if they are not material, there is no problem to the auditor. So when will the auditor express a clean opinion? Tell me. When should the auditor provide a clean opinion? Where the auditor is able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and when the auditor concludes that financial statements are free, not from misstatements, free from material misstatements, then such financial statements do reflect a true and fair view, and hence in that case you are supposed to provide a clean opinion. Yes or no? So that is the concept of materiality level. In future I will make some changes to the wording. In future I will add some words like uncorrected misstatements. Misstatements found by the auditor are different. Uncorrected misstatements are different. What is meant by uncorrected misstatements? Can you try to understand the term uncorrected misstatements in your own way? In the given example, very good. In the given example, the total of misstatements identified by the auditor are 1,10,000. So total misstatements identified by the auditor during the course of audit are 1,10,000. In future, I will use a term called as uncorrected misstatements. I am asking you about what is the meaning of uncorrected misstatements. If you are capable of providing a meaning for that, you can do that. Otherwise, I will explain it in later classes. No. Once you identify some misstatements, it is your duty. It is your, very good. It is your duty as an auditor to make a report to the management. We found the following mistakes. We found the following misstatements in our books of account, in our financial statements. Please make corrections. Please make corrections to these misstatements. If the management made corrections to the misstatements, there would not be any problem to the auditor. Sometimes management may be reluctant to make corrections to the reported misstatements. In that case, such misstatements which are reported by the auditor but have not been corrected by the management are to be considered as dash. Are you able to understand the meaning of the term misstatements and uncorrected misstatements? As an auditor, we need to compare. Finally, in order to form an opinion, we need to consider not total misstatements. We need to consider only uncorrected misstatements. Enough. If I want to explain some more things, you will get confused. No doubt about that. So I am stopping here. Are you able to understand the concept of materiality? That level fixed by the auditor is technically called as materiality level. In those days where we are pursuing CA course, we used to fix a materiality level in abstract terms like 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, etc. But today, the way in which auditor is required to fix materiality level has been changed. A formula is given. What is that? A formula is given in SA 320. As an auditor, you must follow that formula in order to fix dash materiality level. I don't want to go into the details of that. That will be explained under 320, SA 320. Now, tell me, who should tell you that you need to fix a materiality level of 1 lakh? or you need to fix a materiality level of 2 lakhs, or you need to fix a materiality level of 10 lakhs. Who should decide about the amount of misstatements that the auditor can tolerate? Auditor himself. Nobody will tell you that you need to fix a materiality level of 1 lakh. You need to fix a materiality level of 5 lakhs. It is the auditor who is made responsible to take a decision about the level of materiality. Are you able to understand this point or not? What is your understanding? Tell me. It is the responsibility of the auditor to fix a level called as dash, materiality level. While taking such a, how much is the amount of materiality level to be fixed by you? Is it 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, 5 lakhs? It all depends upon your judgment. You are made responsible to take some decisions about the materiality level. Nobody will help you while you are taking such a decision. You alone are made responsible to take such decisions. When somebody is helping you, you can take good decisions. When nobody is helping you, you must be very careful while taking your decisions. That is the reason why they said that as an auditor, you must be very careful, very cautious while taking these judgments. These judgments are required to be taken by the auditor throughout the course of audit. Some decisions may be required to be made by the auditor at the planning stage. Some decisions are required to be made by the auditor while performing the audit, and some other decisions may have to be made by the auditor at the conclusion stage of audit. Every decision during the course of audit is expected to be taken by you as an auditor. Nobody will help you. Therefore, you should be very much careful or cautious while taking such decisions. What type of decisions should the auditor take during the course of performance of audit, or in which areas the auditor is supposed to take decisions? The first one is dash. In the area relating to material. Are you able to understand why I explained all these things to you? In order to understand a particular word called as dash, materiality. That's it. How much risk would you accept? Would you try to accept this much risk, or would you accept this much risk? Who should tell you that you have to accept this much risk or this much risk? It is you. You need to take a professional judgment about the risk that you can accept. Are you able to understand? So, what are the decisions to be made by the auditor during the course of performance of audit? In the following areas, auditor is made responsible in the following areas, auditor is made responsible to take some decisions. Such decisions made by the auditor are to be technically called as dash, professional judgments. In which areas should the auditor take professional judgments? 1. Deciding about materiality level. 2. Deciding about audit risk. The next one. I need an explanation from your side for this point. Please read it on your own. Have you ever heard about the term nature, timing and extent of audit procedures in our earlier discussions? What is meant by extent of audit procedures? Should we perform 100% verification, or is it sufficient if we follow audit sampling? Who is responsible for taking such a decision? Who should tell you that you need to follow audit sampling, or that you need to follow 100% verification? Nobody. It is up to you to decide whether to follow audit sampling or to follow 100% verification, otherwise called as dash, routine checking. So this decision is required to be taken by whom? By the auditor on his own. Nature of audit procedures to be performed by the auditor. I haven't explained till now about what are nature of audit procedures and timing of audit procedures, but I do explain the term extent of audit procedures earlier. So nature of audit procedures to be performed, extent of audit procedures to be performed, the timing of audit procedures to be performed, everything is required to be decided by whom? Decided by the auditor, purely based on his professional judgment. So these are all the areas in which you are made responsible to take dash, professional judgments. What are the areas in which as an auditor you need to take some professional judgments? 1. Area relating to materiality. How much risk can you accept? The nature of audit procedures to be followed, timing of audit procedures to be followed, extent of audit procedures to be followed or performed is a decision to be taken by you as an auditor. Next one. Read the third one and tell me your understanding. During the course of performance of audit, you keep on obtaining information. You know very well that information obtained by the auditor is nothing but an audit evidence. You also know very well that as an auditor, you are not supposed to obtain audit evidence. You are supposed to obtain sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. Whether this much evidence is sufficient or this much evidence is required. Who should take a decision about whether evidence gathered by the auditor is sufficient or is required to gather some more audit evidence? Auditor. So, these are all the decisions that are required to be made by you as an auditor during the course of performance of your audit. Such decisions are technically known as dash. Professional judgment. And most important point that you must understand is, if you do not take appropriate decisions, your opinion will become wrong. If you take appropriate decisions, your opinion will become appropriate. You can reduce your audit risk. So always try to take appropriate professional judgments. In which areas should the auditor take judgments? In the area of materiality, in the area of audit risk, in the area of nature, timing and extent of audit procedures to be performed. Next, while evaluating whether sufficient appropriate audit evidence has been obtained and whether more needs to be done. Is it sufficient or should I try to obtain some more audit evidence? That is to be decided by you as an auditor. Next, the evaluation of management judgment in applying entities AFRF. You know very well about dash. AFRF. What is AFRF? Applicable Financial Reporting Framework. Who is made responsible for preparation of financial statements? Management. What is the responsibility of the management? Management is required to prepare financial statements by following applicable financial reporting framework. Sometimes management may have judged that a particular framework is applicable to them. Management may have judged a particular framework as applicable to them. Then what is your responsibility as an auditor? You need to check whether dash made by dash with respect to dash is dash or dash. I can't repeat the question if I ask you. Ask me. If sometimes it is the responsibility of the auditor to check whether dash made by dash in making dash is dash or not is to be checked by dash. Whether applicable financial reporting framework used by the management for preparation and presentation of financial statements is actually appropriate or not is to be judged by us. Who should tell you that a financial reporting framework followed by the management is appropriate or as inappropriate? It is up to you to decide. So whether FRF used by management is appropriate or not is to be judged by you, judged by the auditor. Are you able to understand this, or should I explain that in a different way? The evaluation of auditor should evaluate about what, should judge about what? Management's judgment in applying financial reporting. Management made use of some financial reporting framework. It is our responsibility as an auditor to verify whether such framework used by the management is applicable financial reporting framework or not. Whether it is correct or not is to be judged by you as an auditor. That is another area wherein auditor is expected to take dash professional judgments. And finally, what type of opinion should you issue? What type of opinion should you issue as an auditor? Should you issue a clean opinion, a qualified opinion, an adverse opinion? Now I want to ask you a question. In which scenarios auditor is responsible for providing a qualified opinion? Good. One, when the auditor is able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and when the auditor concludes that financial statements contains material misstatements, but they are not as a whole, they are not pervasive to the financial statements. In that case, as an auditor, you must have to provide I keep on repeating the same points again and again until I complete essay 705. Why? Because if you fail to remember these things, I need to explain them again and again. Instead of explaining them again and again, it is better for me to repeat it. Okay. So there is one more scenario where the auditor is required to provide a qualified opinion. What is that? When the auditor is unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and when the auditor concludes that the possible effects of undetected, you used that term, the possible effect of undetected misstatements on the financial statements could be material but may not be. Everything is expectation. Why? Because the auditor failed to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. In that case also, you are supposed to provide a qualified opinion, adverse opinion, able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence and concluded that financial statements contains material misstatements which are pervasive in nature. Disclaimer of opinion, unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and when the auditor concludes that the possible effects of undetected misstatements on the financial statements could be both material and pervasive. Tell me, what type of opinion would you express? It depends on your judgment. You are professional. Nobody will tell you that as an auditor you must have to provide a clean opinion, a qualified opinion, an adverse opinion, a disclaimer of opinion, including CA Institute. CA Institute can just guide you. That's it. So ultimately, what type of opinion should you provide is to be decided by whom? By you only. It all depends upon your professional judgment. Are you able to understand this? Tell me, what are the scenarios or situations or examples where the auditor is made responsible to take some professional judgments? Materiality, audit risk. Next one is deciding about the nature, determining. When I say determining, at least some of you people would be able to understand the term RAP. When internal controls are found to be effective, then the possibility of occurrence of frauds will get reduced. The possibility of existence of material misstatements in the financial statements may also be less. In that case, the auditor may decide to follow audit sampling extent. If the auditor finds that internal controls are ineffective, the possibility of existence of frauds and errors would be high, and the possibility of existence of material misstatements in the financial statements would also be high. Depending on that, you will decide the extent of checking to be performed by you. Are you able to recollect it? Good. If you are able to recollect it, you will enjoy the subject. Otherwise, you will just listen to the subject. That's it. Okay. Next. That's it. This is nothing about, not more than about professional judgment. Essentiality is not to be prepared by you. Even if I try to explain that, it's of no use. Professional judgment is essential to the proper conduct of audit. Is it understandable to you or not? If you want to conduct proper audit, you must have to follow appropriate audit procedures. What type of procedures to be followed is again dependent upon professional judgment. This is because interpretation of relevant ethical requirements and standards and informed decisions required throughout the audit cannot be made without application of relevant knowledge. I can't explain this point. After completion of several standards on auditing, if you try to read this sentence, you may be able to understand that. You may be not, maybe you'll be able to understand that after completion of several standards on auditing. Why? Because if I want to explain this point now itself, I need to prove two things. First one is each and every standard on auditing is having an individual objective. SA 200 is having an overall objective. If you do not understand what is individual objective and what is overall objective, I can't explain you point number 2. That is too early to discuss. That is the reason why I am ignoring point number B. And fortunately, point number 4 is easily understandable to you, documentation. Have I ever explained you the term audit documentation earlier? Yes, audit documentation will create an evidence to the auditor that the auditor has performed his audit in accordance with the standards on auditing, which will reduce the liability of the auditor. So whatever you decide has to be written on a paper. That paper is technically called as dash. Audit documentation, otherwise called as working papers, otherwise called as work papers. Professional judgments are made throughout the audit. What is meant by throughout the audit? At the planning stage, during the course of performance of audit, at the conclusion stage of audit. Professional judgments are made throughout the audit and needs to be appropriately, whatever decision you make, you need to record that decision on a paper, including the points that you considered, the points that you evaluated, the conclusions that you have drawn. Everything is required to be written on a paper, so that if somebody asks after some time about why you have taken this type of decision, you can simply show them the documentation maintained by you. Therefore, everything which is decided by the auditor shall have to be written by the auditor on a paper in a detailed manner. Such paper is called as audit documentation. Read it. Professional judgments are made throughout the audit and needs to be appropriately documented. However, professional judgments made by the auditor shall not be a reason for decisions that are not properly supported by facts and circumstances. So, every decision taken by you shall be supported by dash. Shall be supported by facts and circumstances. To create such support only, you are required to maintain dash. Audit documentation. That's it. This is the end of the discussion on topic number 16. Let's have a look into the concept of professional skepticism. As already told to you, if you are capable of distinguishing between audit and investigation, then it will be easier for you to understand the concept of professional skepticism. Earlier, I explained you about the basic difference between auditing and investigation. In auditing, we are expected to provide only a reasonable assurance, whereas an investigator is required to provide an absolute assurance. Why investigator is able to provide an absolute assurance and why the auditor is able to provide only a reasonable assurance? The answer for this is well known to you. Because of inherent limitations of audit and inherent limitations of internal controls. One such inherent limitations of audit is that during the course of performance of audit, as an auditor, you will obtain only a primary or a persuasive evidence. Auditor cannot obtain a conclusive evidence. That is the reason why auditor is expected to provide only a reasonable assurance and not an absolute assurance. Whereas investigators do try to get conclusive evidence. Since investigators are getting conclusive evidence, investigators are able to provide an absolute assurance. That is the basic difference between audit and investigation. I also said to you earlier that there is one more difference between the terms audit and investigation. The basic objective behind appointment of the auditor is to form and to express an opinion on the financial statements about whether they are reflecting a true and fair view or not. Whereas the basic objective behind appointment of an investigator is to find out a fact. To find out a fact. In most of the cases, even a chartered accountant in practice may be appointed as an investigator, for which I have given you an example. You are having a partnership firm. You are the managing partner of such partnership firm. You know very well that some of your employees were involved in defalcation of cash. Defalcation of cash by an employee is a fact. Defalcation of cash by an employee is a fact. But unfortunately, management is unable to identify such defalcation or the person who was involved in defalcation. In that case, if management appoints a chartered accountant holding a valid certificate of practice, not for the purpose of conducting audit, but for the purpose of carrying out an investigation in order to find out the culprits, in order to find out the persons behind defalcation of cash. So, a chartered accountant may be made responsible either to carry out audit, sometimes even to carry out investigation. If I remember it correctly, I don't know whether that particular chapter is still there in CA final or not. There is a particular chapter in CA final auditing called as investigation. wherein you are supposed to learn about how to investigate into different aspects. So without having an understanding of audit and investigation, it may become too difficult for you people to understand the concept of investigation at your CA final level. So be careful, try to understand the difference between audit and investigation. And another important aspect that I told you earlier between audit and investigation is that auditor is just like a watchdog. Auditor is just like a watchdog, whereas investigator is like a bloodhound. What is the difference between watchdog and bloodhound, or what is the nature of a watchdog? In order to explain that point, this is most important point which will have a direct link to the professional skepticism. Why auditor is called as a watchdog? Auditor should not start his work with a doubt or suspicion or disbelief about the truthness and fairness of the financial statements. However, while carrying out the work, even if the auditor gets slightest suspicion, in order to clear his doubt or suspicion, the auditor should dig deep into the matter. That should be the nature of auditing. So at the start of the class, I need to make an assumption that everyone is here only to listen. I should not have any doubt about whether you are going to listen the class or not. But during the course of performance, if I get any doubt about any person about whether he is listening to the class or not, I need to focus much on that person being an auditor. So an auditor should not start his work with a doubt, suspicion or disbelief about the truthness and fairness of the financial statements, whereas investigators do start their work with a doubt or suspicion. In order to have clarity about this, I gave you another example for investigation. For example, if somebody has gone to police station to file a complaint that a theft has taken place in his house, police starts suspecting the person who made the complaint. They suspect everybody. So, police start their investigation with suspicion, with a doubt on everybody. Whereas auditors should not start their work with a doubt or suspicion or disbelief about the truthness and fairness of the financial statements. This is what I explained to you earlier to explain the difference between the terms audit and investigation. Now coming back to the original discussion, what is professional skepticism? In the earlier session, I told you that professional skepticism simply means healthy degree of doubt. What is that? Just now, I said to you that auditor should not start his work with a doubt. Auditor should not start his work with a suspicion or with a disbelief. However, the concept of professional skepticism advised the auditors to maintain not a doubt, but to maintain a healthy degree of doubt. Professional skepticism is not asking us to start our work with a doubt. It is asking us to have a healthy degree of doubt. Having a doubt is different from having a healthy degree of doubt. So, auditor should always have a healthy degree of doubt to ask right kind of questions. If you are having a healthy degree of doubt, you can ask right kind of questions. That is the reason why this professional skepticism is also called as a questioning mind. What is that? Auditor should have a questioning mind. When you are having a healthy degree of doubt, you will try to ask a lot of questions. In such case, it is said that the auditor is having a questioning mind. So, the simple meaning of the term professional skepticism is maintaining a healthy degree of doubt, wherein auditor will try to ask right kind of questions. Therefore, professional skepticism can also be called as an attitude of questioning mind. Now, I want to explain you the importance of professional skepticism. Till now I explained you the meaning of the term professional skepticism, but you need to have an understanding of the importance of the term professional skepticism. For example, there is a company called as A Limited, for which you have been the auditor for the past 3 years. You were the auditor of A Limited for the past 3 years. For the current year also, you have been appointed as the auditor or reappointed as the auditor of the same company, A Limited. So for the past 4 years, you were the auditor of a company called as A Limited. In the first 3 years of audit, you haven't observed any employee fraud or you haven't observed any management fraud. Auditor is unable to detect either employee fraud or management fraud in the past 3 years. Auditor is having good knowledge about the integrity levels of the management as well as about the integrity levels of the employees. Employees are honest. Management is also honest. Therefore, employees were not involved in fraud in the past. Similarly, management was also not involved in fraud in the past. That means there is no defalcation of cash in the organization in the past. There is no misappropriation of assets in the organization in the past. There is no fraudulent financial reporting in the organization in the past. Are you able to recollect all these things? Employees may involve in fraud. In that case, it is called as employee fraud. Usually, employees will try to involve in fraud either through defalcation of cash or through misappropriation of assets. Cash can be defalcated by the employee by following any one of the following ways. One, through omission of transactions, omitting a transaction to be recorded from books of account, through suppression of cash receipts, through inflation of cash payments, through including fictitious payments, and by adopting a technique called as teaming and lading. So, the auditor observed in the past 3 years that employees are very much honest in the organization. Therefore, they were not involved in fraud in the past 3 years. Similarly, management is also honest, and hence the auditor observed that management was not also involved in fraud for the past 3 years. Past is not an indication of future. Past is not an indication of future. Although you are having some confidence about the integrity of the employees, although you are having some confidence about the integrity of the management, although you know very well that as an auditor, you know very well that in the past, either employees or management were not involved in fraud, there is always a possibility. There is always a possibility that either employees of the organization or management itself might have involved in fraud in the current year. Are you able to understand this point, particular point? This point is very much relevant to have conceptual knowledge of the term professional skepticism. So in the past, they were not involved in fraud. Past is not indicative of future. There is every possibility that either employees of the organization or management itself could involve in fraud in the current year because of circumstances beyond their control. Sometimes because of pressures, on the management may try to involve in fraud. Sometimes because of pressures on the employees may also try to involve in fraud. Basically, they are honest. Employees are honest, basically. They were not involved in fraud in the past, but because of the pressures on them, in order to ease from the pressures, sometimes employees would involve in fraud. Similarly, there may be pressures on the management. Because of such pressures, although management was not involved in fraud in the earlier years, there is a chance that management could have involved in fraud in the current year. My salary, I am drawing a salary of say 5,000 rupees per month from Masterminds. Just make an assumption. If that is a reality, there should not be anybody in this class. Okay? So I don't want to reveal that. Magadi jeetam adadani vayasu adakkodu. So I am getting a salary of just 5,000 per month. Whereas my wife has given me an alarm that I need to purchase her a saree worth rupees 50,000. My salary is 5,000. Now I need to purchase a saree worth rupees 50,000. That certainly creates immense pressure on me. In order to ease from that pressure, what should I do? I need to defalcate cash if there is a possibility. If there is a possibility, I need to defalcate cash. Originally, I am honest. But still, today, I am not honest because of pressures on me. This point is helpful for you to understand Essay 240 in future in your CA final level. It was mentioned in Essay 240 that usually employees of the organization were involved in fraud either because they get incentives by involving in fraud or because of pressures. or because of pressures. So this point of pressure is very much important for you to understand essay 240. So although by nature I am having integrity, today I am unable to maintain my honesty levels because of the pressure. Similarly, for the past 3 years, I am declaring a very good amount of profits. But for the market is also anticipating from the management that even for this year, they are going to declare very good amount of profits. But unfortunately, by going through the profit and loss account of the current year, management observed that they suffered with huge loss. What is the expectation of the market on the organization, and what is the reality? The expectation of the market on the organization is that it is going to declare a very high amount of profits even for the current year, but unfortunately they suffered with a loss. In order to meet that expectations, in order to meet the market expectations, management would decide to involve in fraud, to resort to fraudulent financial reporting. I said this point to you earlier, saying that generally employees of the organization may involve in fraud either through defalcation of cash or through misappropriation of assets, whereas management do involve in fraud through fraudulent financial reporting. What is that? This is a technical term. You must understand that management won't involve in fraud either through defalcation of cash or through misappropriation of assets. Usually management do involve in fraud through fraudulent preparing the financial statements wrongly and reporting them is technically called as dash. Fraudulent financial reporting. In the given example, generally management is honest, but because the management has lost its honesty because of the pressure on it. By this, what you need to understand is, although you are honest in the past, it is not an indication of future. In future, you may be dishonest as well. That fact should be considered by you as an auditor, and that fact should be kept in mind by the auditor during the course of performance of audit. That attitude to be maintained by the auditor throughout the course of audit, or attitude of questioning mind to be maintained by the auditor throughout the course of audit is technically called as dash. Healthy degree of doubt, otherwise called as an attitude of questioning mind, otherwise called as professional skepticism. They have not given the meaning of the term professional skepticism, but they have given several areas wherein auditor need to maintain professional skepticism, or several advantages where the auditor maintains professional skepticism. So without having an understanding of the meaning, even if I try to explain several things to you under this heading, you might not be able to understand them. That is the reason why I spend much of my time to explain you the meaning of the term professional skepticism. Now read it. Topic 15, professional skepticism. Professional skepticism means an attitude of questioning mind, and being alert to unusual situations. Fortunately, I have given you an example for the term unusual situations in the course of explaining you section 143 subsection 1 duties of the auditor, particularly clause E, personal expenses charged to revenue account. In the previous session, I have given you an example wherein you are going through the entertainment account. You are going through the entertainment account in the ledger of the entity under your audit. Several items were debited to entertainment account. The value or range of items debited to entertainment account are between 100 to 500. Suddenly, by going through entertainment account, you have observed an expenditure amounting to 4 lakhs debited to entertainment account. Immediately, you got a doubt. Why you got a doubt about the correctness or genuineness of this particular expenditure debited to entertainment account? It is unusual. It is not in the range. It is unusual and it is not in the range. The usual range of expenditure incurred by the organization in entertainment account is between 100 to 500. But you have observed an amount of 4 lakh rupees debited to entertainment account. Naturally, as an auditor, since it is unusual in nature, we need to get a doubt. Till now, we are not having any doubt, but because there is an unusuality in the expenditure debited to entertainment account, there should be a doubt to the auditor about the genuineness of this transaction. This healthy degree of doubt, particularly where the auditor observes unusual transactions, is technically here while starting a checking of entertainment account. I don't have any doubt. I haven't started my work with a doubt or suspicion or disbelief, but I am having a questioning mind. Whenever I identify any unusual transaction, I will get a doubt. That type of doubt is technically called as dash. No, professional skepticism, healthy degree of doubt, otherwise called as an attitude of questioning mind, being alert to unusual. If you are having professional skepticism, you will always be alerted to unusual transactions. Okay? Are you able to understand this? Usually that person sits here every day. Now, unusually she moves to that place. Now I will try to focus more on her in today's class, because she may be avoiding me, and that is the reason why may be sitting there. That is the reason why I am trying to focus on her for today. Because of being a chartered accountant, I am having a professional skepticism. A healthy, it is not a doubt, it is a healthy degree of doubt. Are you able to understand? Okay. So what is professional? It is only for the sake of an example. Don't worry. So professional skepticism means an attitude of questioning mind. ఆడపిల్లల్ని నేనేం అన్నాం, ఏదన్నా అన్నా అనుకో వాళ్ళు ఏడుస్తారు, ఇదంతా నిండిపోతుంది, నేను పడవ కూడా వేసుకురాలా, అందుకని దయచేసి మిమ్మల్ని ఏం అన్న నేను ఊరుకోండి. ప్రొఫెషనల్ స్కెప్టిసిజం మీన్స్ an attitude of questioning mind, being alert to unusual situations and critical assessment of audit evidence. The first two things are easy to understand. What are they? Attitude of questioning mind and being alert to unusual situations. The third one is very difficult to understand, but fortunately, because I have explained you a lot of things relating to audit evidence, you might be in a position to understand this discussion. Otherwise, it is very difficult for you people to understand this discussion at this point of time. I told you several things about audit evidence. What are they? The old definition of audit evidence, the new definition of audit evidence, then the concept of sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. Audit evidence can be classified broadly into two categories, based on source and based on nature. Source has been explained, nature is not yet explained. Based on source, audit evidence can be classified broadly into two categories, internal evidence and external evidence. I explained you the definition of internal and external evidence along with examples for internal evidence and external evidence. Apart from that, we also had a discussion about the reliability standards of audit evidence, which were termed in SA 500 as generalizations of audit evidence. They are 5 in number. 1. External evidence is more reliable than internal evidence. 2. Internal evidence is also reliable when the related internal controls are effective or are satisfactory. 3. Written evidence is, are you able to recollect it? Written evidence is more reliable than oral evidence. 4. Evidence received by the auditor directly from a third party without the intervention of the client is said to be more reliable. And finally, evidence available in original form is more reliable than evidence available in duplicate or carbon copy or facsimile form. And most importantly, I also explained you the concept of corroboration. Have I explained that? What is meant by corroboration? Comparison between different types of evidences to ensure to ensure that all the evidences contains the same content. All the evidences should have the same content. Then only you can satisfy about the genuineness of a transaction. I can't repeat all those things. You must have to recollect it. If you are able to recollect it, it's okay. At least try to recollect it. Even after trying for the best, if you are unable to recollect it, I am here to explain it again. Okay, so what I said to you about the concept of comparison or corroboration, auditor is expected to compare different types of audit evidences. Usually you are expected to compare internal evidences with external evidences. Unfortunately, 90% of the evidences available to the auditor are internal in nature. External evidences are not that much available to the auditor. In that case, the auditor is expected to at least compare one internal evidence with another internal evidence. That process of comparison between external and internal evidence or between internal and internal evidence is technically called as corroboration, and that evidence gathered by the auditor is technically called as corroborative audit evidence. So, because all these things have been discussed in detail, probably you may be able to understand this last sentence, that is critical assessment of audit evidence. An attitude of questioning mind will help the auditor to critically assess the audit evidence. Fortunately, you know very well about audit evidence. I need to explain only about what is meant by critical assessment of audit evidence. Read it again. Professional skepticism means an attitude of questioning mind, being alert to unusual situations, and a critical assessment of audit evidence. What is meant by being alert to being alert to the following situations? What is meant by being alert to unusual situations? Auditor shall be alert in the following situations during the audit. There might be conflict. There might be conflict between multiple audit evidences obtained by the auditor. How the auditor can identify that there is a conflict between one audit evidence and another audit evidence? Just by through not collaboration, corroboration. Through corroboration. So, if you maintain professional skepticism, if you identify any conflict between one audit evidence and another audit evidence, naturally you will get a doubt. Something is fishy. Something is wrong here. Why? Because I am trying to compare internal evidence with external evidences. The content which is appearing in internal evidences is different from the content which is appearing in external evidence, for which I have given you an example also. I made a credit sale to one of my customers. I generated an invoice wherein I mentioned that I sold 1,000 units, and after receipt of these units, my customer has given an acknowledgement to me. In that acknowledgement, the customer said that she is in receipt of 900 units and she has accepted the units. How many units are appearing in the invoice? 1,000. How many units are appearing in the acknowledgement given by the customer? It is only 900. In the given example, invoice is a dash evidence and acknowledgement is a dash evidence. Invoice is an internal evidence. Acknowledgement received from the customer is an external evidence. Quantity appearing in the invoice is 1,000, whereas quantity appearing in acknowledgement received from the customer is only 900. But the value of the sale is accounted for 1,000 units. In that case, you can say that something has been done wrongly. How the auditor get a doubt about whether the transaction is properly recorded or not? Because the auditor finds a conflict. What is the conflict? Conflict in the given example is between quantity appearing in dash and quantity appearing in dash. Quantity appearing in the sale invoice and quantity appearing in the acknowledgement. So whenever you identify any conflict between two evidences, if you are maintaining professional skepticism, obviously you will get a doubt about the genuineness of this transaction. When you get a doubt about the genuineness of a particular transaction, you will probe more into that transaction. When you start probing more into the transaction, naturally you will have a higher chance of identifying whether the transaction is a genuine transaction, a real transaction, a fictitious transaction, etc. Are you able to understand this point? Read it again. Being alert to the following situations include: auditor shall be alert in the following situations during the audit. There might be conflicts between multiple audit evidences obtained by the auditor, and there may be doubt as to the reliability of audit evidence. There may be a doubt as to the reliability of audit evidence. Conditions that may indicate possible fraud. I can't explain you this point because there are almost 40 to 50 points given in essay 240 under the heading conditions that may indicate possible fraud. And unfortunately, essay 240 is not made part of our syllabus. I won't say anything, but I will always try to prove that. I will say something and I will try to prove it by showing the relevant standard on auditing. At least then you will understand that okay, there is a particular standard called as essay 240 wherein several conditions were mentioned or indications were given by the CA Institute about the existence of fraud. They are ranging from 40 to 50. It is not possible for us to explain, for us to have a discussion about that in the class. This is what I am referring to. Examples of fraud risk factors. What are they? Examples of fraud risk factor. Appendix 3 to essay 240 has given some examples of circumstances. As an auditor, if you encounter any one of the following circumstances, during the course of performance of your audit, you must get a doubt. About the existence of fraud. If you maintain professional skepticism, if you identify any one of the following circumstances, naturally you will get a doubt about the existence of a possible fraud. And that questioning mind is technically called as professional skepticism. I repeat, the following are the examples of circumstances. Here, they were mentioned them as conditions that may indicate a possible fraud. Here, the terminology given in essay 240 is slightly different. In essay 240, they were termed as examples of circumstances that indicate the possibility of fraud. I don't want to explain anything, just to go through the appendix, and you can easily understand that whatever I said to you earlier is correct. Almost there are 30 to 40 points given under that heading. Yes or no? Count them. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 31 points are given. 31 points. If you are having knowledge of these points, then only you can understand the term conditions that may indicate possible fraud. At least by now, please trust me. So I cannot explain that point as simple as such. It takes hours together to explain all these points. But you will certainly learn all these points at your CA final level. And there are two more appendix given to this standard. The first one is fraud risk factors. Indicators of possible fraud can also be called as dash. Fraud risk factors. The fraud risk factors identified in this appendix are only examples of such factors that may be faced by auditors in a broad range of situations. Can you please understand the term pressures by going through this? What I said to you earlier, usually employee of the organization will try to involve in fraud either to get dash or because of dash, either to get incentive or to ease from the pressure. That is the reason why the term incentive or pressure has been given here. Financial stability or profit. I don't want to explain all the points. Just I want to explain you 2 to 3 points so that you will have an idea about what is being discussed under this appendix. Financial stability or profitability is threatened. The profitability of the entity is threatened by economic, industry or entity operating conditions such as high degree of competition or market saturation accompanied by declining margins. The entity under your audit is facing with very high degree of competition or is having some issues in respect of the demand of their particular product because of market saturation. And because of these two things, the entity's margins are in the declining trend. To show a rosy picture, although the entity's margins are declining, although the entity is getting lower amount of profits, to show a rosy picture, there is a possibility that the management of the entity might decide to inflate their profits. Although they are getting lower amount of profits, management may have decided to inflate their profits. When the management wants to inflate their profits, then obviously management had to involve in fraud through fraudulent financial reporting. Why management is resorting to fraud here? Because of some pressures on the management. What are the pressures on the management? There is a high degree of competition being faced by the management in the recent past. Apart from that, there is a market saturation for the product being sold by the entity. Because of these reasons, the entity's margins are declined in the current year. Till the last year, the entity is getting very good amount of profits, but for the current year, the entity suffered with some losses or lesser profits. Market is expecting much from the company, but the company suffered with losses or is getting lower amount of profits. To show to the market that everything is going on good, everything is fine, to show a rosy picture, management of the entity might have decided to involve in fraudulent financial reporting. Here, there is some pressure on the management to show healthy profits to the market, and hence management could resort to fraud. What do you understand by listening to this example? While you are conducting the audit, you may have identified that the entity under your audit is facing with high degree of competition. You might have observed that the product being sold by the entity under your audit is saturated. In that case, you should get a doubt. What is the doubt the auditor should get? There is a high competition to the entity under our audit. There is a market saturation to the product being produced by the entity under our audit. But still, the entity under our audit is showing a very good amount of profits. Probably, the entity's management might have involved in fraud in order to show a rosy picture. That is the doubt the auditor should get. So, these factors, when you observe, shall be considered by you as dash. These factors, when the auditor identified, shall be considered by the auditor as dash. Fraud, in these factors, the risk of fraud is very, very high. And that is the reason why they are technically called as dash. Fraud risk factors. Are you able to understand this point called as fraud risk factors? Fraud risk factors. So if you are having professional skepticism, whenever you identify that there is a market saturation to the product, and whenever you identify that the margins are not being declined, then you will get a doubt. Something is fishy, something has been managed by the entity. There is a market saturation to the product being manufactured by the entity. There should be a lesser profits earned by the company in the current year, but the company is reflecting the same amount of profits. Certainly something has went wrong. That is the doubt the auditor should get when you identify this factor, and hence these factors are being technically called as dash fraud risk factors. Are you able to understand the importance of fraud risk factors? If you know more and more fraud risk factors while you are carrying out audit, if you encounter any one of those fraud risk factors, if you come across any one of those fraud risk factors, you will automatically get a doubt. So you will try to focus more on such areas so that auditor can provide an appropriate opinion, so that auditor can reduce the audit risk to an acceptably low level. Please respond. Are you able to understand this point, or should I revert back to our original discussion? I want to explain two more examples under the heading fraud risk factors. Then only you can have better understanding of the term, that second point. What is the second point, third point, in fact, appearing in our material? Conditions that may indicate possible fraud. These are all the conditions that may indicate possible fraud. There is a significant decline in customer demand and increasing business failures in either the industry or in the overall economy. Every entity in the economy is getting affected with lower profits, whereas the entity under your audit has shown a higher amount of profit. The customer's demand is decreasing. Business failures in the country are increasing, but the entity under your audit has shown rapid growth. In that case, you should get a doubt about the correctness of the financial statements. Like that, these are all technically called as dash factors. Risk factors, otherwise called as fraud risk factors. Now come back to our original discussion. Being alert to the following situations include: auditor shall be alert in the following situations during the audit. There might be conflicts between multiple audit evidence obtained by the auditor. In that case, actually this is not a specific or separate point. This is a point which is a part of point number A. That is the reason why I haven't explained anything about point B. There might be conflicts between multiple audit evidences obtained by the auditor. In that case, auditor should get a doubt about dash of dash, about the reliability of such. Whenever the auditor identifies dash between dash and dash, the auditor should get a dash about dash. Whenever the auditor identifies any conflict between multiple audit evidences, the auditor should get a doubt about the reliability of audit evidence. That healthy degree of doubt or questioning, attitude of questioning mind is being called by us as professional skepticism. Followed or not? Next one. Conditions that may indicate possible fraud. Circumstances that suggest the need for audit procedures in addition to those required by standards on auditing. I can't explain this point directly as of now, but certainly I will explain you some other point under this heading. In future, you will be able to understand this point on your own. There are several standards on auditing which are known to you. I referred to several standards in my discussion. For example, I referred to SA 200. We in fact completed SA 210. I referred to SA 240, which is shown just now to you. Yes or no? I referred to SA 250. What is SA 250? consideration of laws and regulations in an audit of financial statements. I refer to SA 300, audit planning strategy and audit program. I refer to SA 320, audit materiality. I refer to SA 500, audit evidence. I refer to SA 505, external confirmations. I refer to SA 540, accounting estimates. I refer to SA 550, related parties. I refer to SA 560, subsequent events. In order to explain you the term subsequent events, I even explained you events occurring after the date of balance sheet, adjusting events, non-adjusting events, duties of the auditor with respect to adjusting events and non-adjusting events. I refer to SA 570, going concern. I refer to SA 580, written representations, information and explanations provided by the management to the auditor in writing are to be technically called as written representations. I even refer to SA 600, using the work of internal auditor. I am not confident about that, but surely I might have referred to this point SA 600 using the work of another auditor, otherwise called as branch auditor. I refer to SA 700, 701, 705, 706, 710, etc. All deal with audit reporting. So there are several standards on auditing which are made part of our syllabus. All those standards on auditing mention or specify audit procedures. All these standards issued by the CA Institute specifies about audit procedures to be followed by the auditor. All standards on auditing specifies about the audit procedures to be followed by the auditor while carrying out audit. So, as an auditor, you are expected to follow all dash. As an auditor, you are expected to follow all the audit procedures that are mentioned by CA Institute in standards on auditing. Remember, all these audit procedures mentioned by the CA Institute in different standards on auditing are minimum audit procedures. What are they? They are required. As an auditor, you must have to follow some additional audit procedures depending upon the circumstances. Depending upon the circumstances. So, what is the importance of standards on auditing? Standards on auditing specifies or mentions about some audit procedures, and those audit procedures mentioned in all standards on auditing are minimum audit procedures. Sometimes circumstances may require, the auditor to follow some additional audit procedures. So, circumstances may suggest the need. Circumstances that suggest the need for audit procedures. In addition to those required by standards on auditing. So, standards on auditing elaboratively explains audit procedures. But the auditor is of the view that those procedures mentioned in the standard are not sufficient, and auditor wants to follow some additional audit procedures. When a situation requires following additional audit procedures than is mentioned in standards on auditing, certainly such situation requires some focus by the auditor. That is the reason why the auditor might have decided to follow dash procedures. Very good. Very few people are able to understand my discussion, particularly this point. The auditor was of the opinion that there is a need to follow dash, additional audit procedures, than is mentioned in dash. than is mentioned in standards on auditing. That itself implies that audit is giving due importance to that scenario or circumstance which is fraud, which may be a fraud prone area, So all these things can be identified by you as an auditor only when you are able to maintain dash. Only when you are able to maintain professional skepticism. This is point number 1. Professional skepticism means an attitude of questioning mind, being alert to unusual situations, and critical assessment of audit evidence. Now they started explaining the concept of critical assessment of audit evidence. Fortunately, the points that are given under that heading are easily understandable to you because we had a discussion on essay 500. Please read it on your own. Critical assessment of audit evidence. Sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. Is there a requirement for an alternative or additional evidence? Like this, auditor can critically assess audit evidence when he is having a healthy degree of doubt, which is technically called as professional skepticism. And professional skepticism is necessary for the auditor to reduce the risk of overlooking. If you are having professional skepticism, you will focus on dash transactions, unusual transactions or unusual circumstances. So the risk of overlooking unusual circumstances will get reduced if you maintain dash, if you maintain professional skepticism. Enough. That is sufficient for you, and this is also easily understandable to you. Taking inappropriate decisions relating to nature, timing. So if you are having professional skepticism, you might decide to extend audit procedures. Till then, you might have applied audit sampling. From then, you might have decided to follow full checking, otherwise called as 100% verification, otherwise called as routine checking. You made changes to the nature, timing, and extent of audit procedures because you are having dash professional skepticism. If you do not have professional skepticism, you keep on following audit sampling in a scenario where audit sampling is not suitable to be followed. That means you are following inappropriate audit procedures. When the auditor follows inappropriate audit procedures, obviously there will be a risk to the auditor called as audit risk. So if you want to reduce your audit risk, what should you do? You need to maintain an attitude of dash. The auditor may accept records and documents as genuine unless the auditor has reason to believe to the contrary. This is what I told you, like auditor should not start his work with a doubt, suspicion or disbelief about the truthness and fairness of the financial statements. In case of doubt about the reliability of information or indications of possible fraud, the standards on auditing require that auditor should investigate further. Anybody can provide an answer. Have I explained this point to you? Yes. Don't start your work with a doubt or suspicion or disbelief. That is point number 4. If you get any doubt or suspicion or disbelief, in order to clear your doubt or suspicion, the auditor should start investigating into the matter. The auditor should dig deep into the matter. That is point number 5. And finally, the auditor cannot be expected to disregard past experience of the honesty and integrity of the management. And don't try to read this. Enough. This is all about professional skepticism.